Could I just start with a thank you to all of you for coming today, and also to the GTs for lending us their facility. That's much appreciated. Thank you. Just starting with the board, we have Tony Wrathall on the right wing. We have Martyn Starnes, and we have Simon Hallett in the middle, and then we have John Morgan on the left wing. Just by way of a very brief, I always get told off by Simon for talking too much at the beginning of these things, so I will keep it as short as I can. But just a very brief update, starting with football. I mean, clearly everyone knows that the results have been disappointing for all of us, and we need to improve. That's probably the most obvious statement of the obvious that I've made. But the board believes that we have a very good manager, and we are very keen to support our manager to get it right. So that's where we are on football. You know, clearly an important game today, but a lot more important games to come this season. So we will continue to support our manager. And very keen that the Green Army gets behind him to do what he needs to do to get it right. Finances, as we've discussed before, we've made 3 years of cash profits, which is untypical for football clubs. It's really important because the cash profits that we make, we don't pay them out to the shareholders. We don't. All of those cash profits go back into reinvestment into the football club and into the football team to improve. And so this is all about, trying to generate a cash surplus to put back into the club and into the football team. So we're proud of what we've achieved to date, and we need to continue to do that. As I say, not to enrich people, but to continue to improve the club both on and off the pitch. In terms of the football stadium, we have a big day coming up on Thursday. Very keen for everyone to come. Anyone who's got a view, positive or negative, please come along. I mean, we are very, very positive about what the grandstand will do for the club. We think it will drive significant additional revenues into the club, and probably most importantly, it will provide much better 21st century accommodation for existing supporters, and a great way of attracting new supporters with good quality accommodation. Finally, people. Clearly, all businesses are about people, but probably football clubs more than other businesses even. And we, as well as supporting Derek on the pitch, we have made and are continuing to make further investment in the staff off the pitch. So Zach's at the back. He's come and joined us as club secretary, which has freed up John to be head of operations and sort of drive the quality of the supporter experience forward. And we've just made a really good hire, I think, in the form of Jamie Yabsley to head up the marketing side of the club. Jamie was until recently head of marketing and events at Plymouth City Council. He's done a really great job in terms of promoting the city. He's an ardent season ticket holder and passionate Argyle fan, and I'm sure he'll do a really, really great job for us. And he'll work very closely with Rick, clearly on the comms side, to sort of drive that marketing effort and promotion of the club forward. When I say promotion of the club, he's not responsible for getting the club promoted. He's responsible for marketing our achievements. So with that, Simon, hopefully that wasn't too long for you, and we'll turn it over to questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Jackie Moyer. James, I'm easily confused, and I've been following all the potential developments. And of course, we all welcome the grandstand development, long awaited. But I can't get my head around how the development of Higher Home Park is going to benefit Plymouth Argyle Football Club. Can you spell that in ways that I can understand, please? How the football club will benefit from the new ice rink and the offices and food outlets?
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. I'll come on to the benefits, which are, I think, reasonably straightforward to the club. But it's really important to say from the outset that the the development around the football club, it always has been, and I know there have been critics of it, but it's been first, second and third about Plymouth Argyle. And that's not just in terms of my aspiration, the board's aspiration, but is the city's aspiration. However, it's not just about the football club. We have got a wonderful ice hockey team that's been training for, I think, 28 years, twice a week, that's never played a home game because I can't play that on kidney-shaped ice. We have passionate ice skaters that are dealing with facilities that are outdated and are the wrong shape and the wrong size and so on. So the ice rink is clearly not for Plymouth Argyle supporters in their capacity as Plymouth Argyle supporters, but it is a really important community asset for the city and for the surrounding region. The next closest ice is Swindon or Cardiff. I'm not sure which is closer, but a long way away anyway, so it's an important asset. Parts of the development are commercial, and they include, for example, a hotel. As we come up to 2020, the view of the city, and I think they're absolutely right on this, is one of the biggest disappointments within Plymouth for 2020 is the lack of good quality hotel accommodation. So it's a commercial activity. The ice rink is loss-making. The grandstand is of loss-making by any normal metric. The hotel will make a profit, but it's important to the city, notwithstanding. In terms of benefit to the club, it really comes in two areas. In terms of the preparation, the planning and so on, the club is effectively being subsidised by private interests to do that. It is more efficient and there'll be savings in terms of the build setup. So if we have the same contractor, they will spread their setup costs across the two activities. And then there's what's effectively a property tax or a development tax called a Section 106 obligation, which runs to several £100,000, and my private company interests are picking that up rather than the club having to pick it up. So there is benefit to the football club of doing it. The final part, and I'm not going to make any promises or suggestions that will be crystallised, not because it won't be, but because I don't know. I haven't got a crystal ball, but the club does have the right to benefit in the value uplift on the Home Park part of the development. Now, there's a large number of costs that come first, and there are what's called overage agreements with the bank that funded that with the last prior to administration and with the city council. So I don't know, how much the club will receive from that. It might not receive anything. It might receive quite a bit. But as I say, sorry, that's as clear as I can be. Thank you.
If I can just pick up a couple of questions that have come in through email that are related in that case. Simon, perhaps if I look to you, there was a couple of questions that came in around why did we put in a joint application for all of the building works?
Thanks, John. Yeah. The reason why it was a joint application was primarily because it would have been disingenuous for us as a club to have put in an application for the refurbishment of the grandstand and what goes along with that, whilst pretending that we didn't know what was going on at Home Park. So the two applications were clearly important to the city, and clearly we felt that it would just have been disingenuous for us to have put them in separately. Though obviously, when I say we, I mean PAFC would have put in for the grandstand and James's interest would have put in for the other one. So that was the main reason. Having said that, there are so many costs involved in putting in these applications that the club has saved money because James's private interests have, I think, generously agreed to pick them up. The S106 fees, a bunch of the other fees, plus James people have been helping the club work on the design and so on, the planning for the refurbishment of the grandstand. So the club has saved quite significant amounts of money by putting in the applications jointly.
Thank you, Simon. And just before we finish that topic, James, back to you. There's a query come in around car parking, which is featured large in the media over the last couple of weeks. Would you just want to cover off the car parking issue?
I can certainly try to. I mean, I think I probably earned a PhD in car parking over the last couple of months. I didn't realise that it was so complicated. But two of the areas that were identified early on as issues we need to be sensitive about. One was traffic and one was parking. The traffic bit was a combination of the local roads, Outland Road and the roads off it, and then Manadon Junction as to the traffic on that. But both those have been, they're separately assessed by people with very pointy heads and great brains who sort of work out traffic flows, and they're comfortable with the impact on the junction and the impact on the roads. So the traffic bits really, and this is my way of describing it, is you chunk it up into three different parts. There's non-match day normalised traffic and parking, and the facilities that we have, the additional parking that we're providing is adequate for the normalised parking requirements. There's then what I call sort of medium-sized events, so looking at the conference banqueting centre where we have over 250 people coming along to an event, as to how we accommodate parking for them. And the parking in the evenings and at weekends, non-match days, very straightforward. There's piles of parking again around. There is, if you have a larger conference during the day, during the weekday, it does put pressure on the park and ride. The park and ride could still accommodate it, but if demand grows in the requirement for the park and ride, it could start impacting on that. So what we've done is we've reached an agreement with Plymouth City Bus, where they've kindly agreed to host up to 450 cars during the daytime across at the Milehouse depot. And then there's clearly the Matchday parking and the big events, so the Rod Stewart concert, the Elton John concert type of scenario, and those will have separate management plans agreed with the council. As far as Matchday's parking is concerned, clearly that's not impacted much by the development. It's impacted by the number of people that come to watch Argyle, and clearly the biggest single driver of that is how we're performing on the pitch and which division we're in. But the parking experience at Plymouth Argyle, I think I've went to virtually all of the away games last year and the year before that, and so far this year. And in terms of our parking arrangements here, they are probably one of the best I've seen around the country, but we want to make them better still. So we are looking at public transport, we're looking at additional parking off-site and so on. So there's still work to be done on the match day parking, but that is not part of the planning application, the way that the planners look at it. That's okay, John.
John McNulty. Sorry, can you hear me? Just a quick one on the car parking at the Milehouse depot. Will that be at a cost to the supporters, or is that a freebie from Milehouse?
The parking at Milehouse, John, will be for those medium-sized daytime conferences. So it won't be for Saturday parking for match day. I suspect we will not charge delegates separately for that. It'll be part of the package that we offer to hopefully international and national conference users.
Okay, thank you.
The way that Section 106, and you're quite sorry. You're quite right that a Section 106 is not a tax. It is. I was trying to explain it as to the nature of it. It is a charge that is made on a development for the impact that development may have on local services. So, well, I was just about to come on to that. Sorry, if you give me a chance. So, the way in which it works is the council comes up with a list of asks of improvements that it would like, and it looks at those in the context of the totality of the development. It's a single application we put in, and then you normally negotiate those. What we've done with the council is we have agreed that we will just give them a sum of cash, and that they can then spend that on the improvements in the area. So there's one application, there is one charge, one Section 106 charge, and that Section 106 charge is going to be borne by us, not by Plymouth Argyle Football Club. It arises from the development, which includes the grandstand, it includes the ice arena, it includes the commercial developments and so on. It is a charge made in relation to the application, which includes the totality of those. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hi, good morning, Mark Wilmot. If I could just take you back to the parking issue. Obviously, use of the Plymouth City Bus depot for conferences is terrific. However, Exeter Chiefs, just up the road, have similar parking issues to ourselves, and they offset some of their parking to the local business parks on match days. Do you not think it might be useful to try and gain similar sort of use of Plymouth City Bus depot on match days as well?
Well, we may be able to do that with what we're currently... We've got a supporters group called the Green Army Grandstand Working Group, GAGWAG, that's set up, and what we have agreed to commission through that group is an analysis of match day parking. And I think you're exactly right, but I don't think it's one of those, or it feels to me as if it's not one of those things which is dealt with one shot. It is a whole series. So I think there is off-site parking. That may be at Plymouth City Bus, it may be at local schools that aren't operating. I think there's improved bus transport and so on. So I think there's probably a host of things that we need to look at, and we need to look at that in the context of not today's match day parking, but as and when we get back into the championship, the levels of crowds we can expect at that point.
Thank you, James. We've got a couple of questions coming around club finances. Martyn, if I could bring you in on this one. There's a question around last year's unbudgeted income, Liverpool game, and a couple of player sales. Could you cover where the money went?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, there's a lot of demands on the finances that come into the club. When I first arrived here 4.5 years ago, and I looked at the training facilities, they were really poor for a club that had been in the Championship. We had 2 grass pitches over at Harper's Park. For part of the year, when we had the inclement weather, they were not fit for purpose. So it's been an ambition of the board now for some years to try and improve those facilities and bring them up to the required standard. And some of the money that we generated over the last season or two has been used to improve Harper's Park. I think if you speak to Luke McCormick, who's probably been the longest serving player here and has knowledge of the pitches over a long period of time, would say that they're now in the best condition they've ever been. And that is a big advantage to the manager in terms of his preparation of matches, but it also helps in terms of the recruitment of players. If you get players down here, whether they're on trial or whatever it might be, or on loan, and they see that your training facilities are not up to standard, they will be tempted to go elsewhere. You know, they will be impressed by what we now have in two pitches. It's still not enough. We still need to invest more in our facilities, and we'll be looking to do that. We've also had some legacy issues with the stadium that have needed maintenance and repairs that we've not been in a position to undertake. That work has been done and is ongoing. So some of the money has been applied to that. We also used some of the funds to pay down some fairly expensive debt, which has saved the club interest. And of course, we're also making some additional funds available to the manager in January, so that he's got the opportunity to strengthen and improve the squad.
Thank you, Martyn. Any questions from the floor?
Yeah, I can repeat the question, John. It was the question was in relation to the Section 106 agreement. Have we got any idea as to how the council will spend that money? The answer is we've got some idea, because they started off with a list of things for us to improve, and we said, look, you know, we aren't in the business of improving. Why don't we just give you the money to go and do all of it? That in terms of what we would like them to do, in terms of what we were discussing with them, it was very Central Park orientated, and it was as far as we could push it, it was in the immediate surrounds. It was this part of Central Park, but it goes further than that. So, you know, what we'd love to see, for example, and what we'll be doing some work outside the Section 106 on, and the we hope the council will reciprocate that with our money. On the other side is Gilbert Lane, which has been tidied up recently, but there's a lot of work to be done on sort of rebuilding the walls and taking the old sort of fencing out and replanting and so on. So, thank you.
A couple of questions. I think this club has got actually fantastic parking. When we go to away games, we hardly get anything at all, so I don't know what the complaint is about the parking. Second question, James, is have we got the name of the hotel that's coming here?
On the first
Looking
point,
for friends and family if it's yours.
Well, what's interesting, I mean, on the first point in terms of parking, I agree with you, but I still think there's quite an onus on us to become increasingly customer facing and treat supporters as customers, you know, rather than just loyal supporters. So if we can make our parking offer even better than other clubs, then you know, that's something we're keen to do. And I think there are things that we can do which aren't that complicated or that expensive to make it better. As far as the name of the hotel, we are in fairly advanced discussions with an international hotel company to brand. It'll be an internationally branded hotel with what I think is a very good brand, but I'm biased because we've been negotiating with them, so I'm bound to think they're good. Thanks again.
Any questions from the floor?
Hi, there is Ian Lobby. Just a quick one. I echo the gentleman just now about the away game parking. I think our facilities are really good, and I know that if the increase in traffic is going to take demand, but that's for future years to come. At the moment, we need to strong and stabilise our club at the moment and go forward. The question I was going to ask is, in recent trips, especially to Bradford, just looking at their model, maybe in the future, would you consider as a board doing similar to what their chairman has done and reduce the price of the season tickets for a season with the catchment area across Devon and Cornwall to encourage families to come along more? In Echo, if you instead of having 8,000 to 10,000 there, why not get 15,000, 16,000 in, and at round about the same price, generate a better atmosphere, and in turn, hopefully, generate more revenue through the club shop and the retail outlets and the food outlets, would then generate a bit more income coming into the club, and maybe that could be a way forward to get more families and the youngsters involved in coming forward and actually supporting a local team instead of looking at the Premiership teams up country.
I think we agree completely with your goals, and in fact, I think, you know, getting more family friendly, getting more families to come is part of our overall vision for the club over the next several years. I don't know enough about what's actually happened at Bradford to be able to judge whether that would be financially viable here. You know, you need to know that if you're halving the ticket price, you need to double the attendance, clearly, just to be able to stay the same. In terms of finances, though, obviously there are the ancillary benefits that you mentioned. But I just don't know enough about the Bradfords, whether it's working out financially for them. And I say that because, of course, you know, financially, the club has to be viable financially in order to invest in the first team and the infrastructure that Martyn mentioned. So we'd certainly share your ambition, but whether that's the way to do it, I simply don't know.
I was going to add, because I did when Bradford first brought that in, their previous chairman brought that in, I said, you know, it's a really interesting model. How are you going to make sense of it financially? And he said, what we'd do is we'll increase the ticket prices quite markedly when we go up the leagues. Now, they've only obviously made, they were towards the bottom of League Two. At that point, they're now at towards the top of League One, and they haven't been able to do that. And I think very interestingly, when you looked at the FA Cup match, of the 20-odd thousand folk that come to league matches, even though it was £10 per ticket and £5 for youngsters, I think, for that game, they only had less than 5,000 people turn up for it. So I think that model's really still got to be proven, and I think when they get up into the Championship, where the average loss each year for the last 3 years for a Championship club has been over £10 million per annum, you need to be on your game and that's going up, by the way, rather than coming down. Which is horrendous. If you spend 10 years in the Championship, the average is that you've lost £100 million. So you've got to be really, really good on your game when we get back to that level. Sorry, Martyn.
Hi, thanks for the question, Ian. We get a certain amount of benchmarking information from other clubs, and other clubs have attempted to follow the Bradford experiment, if you can still call it an experiment, and they've abandoned it, I think, in most cases. Bradford continue to do it, but when you look at the benchmarking, their revenues from ticket prices are actually no more than ours. When you look at the prices that they're charging, they do get a bit of extra, obviously, from away supporters. They've got 18,000 season ticket holders, I believe, there, and they're very dependent upon 18,000 buying them in order to make it stack up for them. And I think you've got to look at it in isolation to each club. You're quite right that they're probably making more money from their secondary spend, but you've got to have the structure to be able to benefit from that secondary spend from all those people. As James said, they must be really disappointed that having got 18,000 season ticket holders, they've only got 4,500 to 5,000 people turning up for a cup game. And I think last week we probably had 400 or 500 Argyle fans there to make up the numbers as well. So I think I echo James's point that it is an interesting model, but it's so far unproven across the game at the moment.
Gents, I'm keen to cover off the final few questions we've got about finances that have came in. Perhaps, Martyn, looking back to you, would you just be able to describe to us the totality of the club's assets and including the ownership of the training ground, which are questions that have come in?
Yeah, I mean, the main asset of the club obviously is the stadium. We've got other money involved in obviously fixtures and fittings, furniture, grounds equipment, that type of thing. Obviously, there's money tied up in stocks for the shop and for the bars and the hospitality, that sort of area. As far as the training ground is concerned, we have a lease on the training ground, a 99-year lease, of which there's still 90 years to go, and we pay rent to PCC for the use of that facility.
Thank you, Martyn. And leading on from facilities, I'm keen to bring John and Tony in. Looking at the supporters bar facilities, both in the interim phase during the redevelopment and post-development, would you just be able to cover what we're looking to provide and also what the involvement of our friends of the Green Taverners are? John, if you could cover the interim phase, and so if you could cover the post-development phase, and Tony, if you could describe what we're looking through during the redevelopment, that would be good.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming this morning. I think the issue with the bar, which is going to be located at this end of the new development, GTs, as we know, have been great supporters of the club in good times and in bad, and we're in good times now. And when they expressed a desire to remain involved in that Matchday experience provision, it seemed to make total sense for us to grab that offer with both hands. So we're delighted that that's going to happen, and we're looking forward to that ongoing relationship into the future.
Do you want me to pick up on the interim? So we've got a, hopefully, and this is clearly subject to planning and not prejudging the outcome of Thursday's meeting, but subject to planning, we are keen to start pretty quickly in terms of the grandstand part of the development, and so the ice will hopefully follow at all around the same time. So the question is how we're going to provide this facility before the new facility is built. So this facility will carry on for a period, but we will need to look at replacing this for a short number of months until the new facility is built. But we are planning to do that and to make sure that we don't, we think this is a great facility for supporters, and we don't want to see a gap in the provision of it. So I think we're just about there with Gary and Liam in terms of negotiating the arrangements for the interim bit. I sent a note back to Liam last night, but he says he hasn't read it, but I think we're just about there.
Thank you, James. Questions from the floor. Ed, I've just seen you come in a couple of moments ago. I have a question for you that you sent in, but I'll hand you the microphone to ask it in person.
Thank you, John. Briefly, I'd like to say it's great to actually see plans come into fruition, hopefully, with the grandstand development, because we're waiting a long time for that. But my specific question was touched on a little bit. I was pleased to hear Martyn say that there should be some more money in the budget for the January strengthening. And I would personally like to see some of that used as the scientific testing backup for the players, which has been used for the last couple of seasons, using a local company which is international and has not been actioned this season. Whether that's had any effect on the injury situations and things, I don't know. But I do think that the testing can be a useful tool for our manager and his team, and it is used by some very prestigious clubs and international sailing and cycling situations. So I'd like to see some of the budget money go on that, which, if there is some available, that would be great.
Shall I just respond to that? And then I think there was a separate question you had as well, Ed, in terms of the safe standing, or standing as we'd like to call it, because we don't as a club accept, and the English Football League doesn't accept, that standing is unsafe. So, just on the sort of sports science part of it, we have agreed to increase the budget in terms of the sports science and support for the manager, but that's separate from the increase in the budget for players. How the manager chooses to spend that is very much his prerogative. I mean, we've got an approach where we think meddling is a bad thing. So we believe that you appoint the right people, you support them, and you let them get on and sort of do their job, as opposed to telling them what to do. So that's very much the manager's call. On the safe standing bit, does someone else want to? I mean, I can rabble on about that, or does someone else want to talk to it? Or thank you. I was looking. This is what you. I was looking for my colleagues' response. So on safe standing, as far as the board's position, the club's position, we are supporters of standing. As I say, we don't accept that there is unsafe standing. I think all the evidence is that as long as you organise it properly, you don't need rail seating for it to be safe. So we'd like to see that introduced. Under the current legislation, we cannot introduce it because we've been in the championship for more than 3 years. It's for more than 3 consecutive years. It's a very odd set of rules that it's deemed to be safe in certain situations and unsafe in others, which doesn't make any sense to us, but we don't write the legislation. We are supporting the English Football League, and the Premier League is I understand, also supportive that we should be allowed to bring back safe standing, but that's not going to come back in time for the new grandstand, again subject to planning. If we get planning, we want to start on that and do that quickly. But we have got stage 2 of the development, and the board would be keen to explore standing in the 2 corners if we're allowed under legislation to do that at the point. There's a whole series of benefits to that, and I think it goes back to Ian's point about that does again give us the ability to differentially price, so we can lower the price, potentially for younger supporters, for example, who are keen to stand, and you can there's a sort of ratio of 1.8 to 1, so you can say, okay, well let's have some standing, but reduce the ticket prices there to get other people in that wouldn't naturally come. So very, very keen. Unfortunately, I understand the Prime Minister is working all hours on Brexit at the moment and isn't really focused on football, sadly. Thanks.
Any other questions? I'll go back to my list in that case. Simon, you touched upon values earlier. We haven't yet gone public with our new suite of values that have been developed internally. Would you like to describe what the new suite of club values are and how we intend to use them going forward?
Thanks. I won't go into details. I will just say that in general terms, what we are trying to achieve is that we want to be a values-driven organisation. The main part of that will be that we will strive to be excellent in everything that we do. It will be a focus on improving the fan environment here. It will be a focus on improving the reach of the club, primarily throughout the rest of the southwest, but ultimately we hope beyond just the southwest of England. So really what we're trying to do, as I say, is to become a values-driven organisation. We're beginning to promote that within the club through Martyn, John's and Zach's influences. And we will be going public, I think, sometime in, I don't want to put a date on it, but we will be publishing that for further discussion sometime in the future. Sorry, I know that we always get caught by putting deadlines on, so I'm refusing to do so.
Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, John. It was mentioned earlier that we are now in the good times. It's kind of a relative statement. It may be good in terms of the financial situation, but of course we're bottom of the league. Could I perhaps ask Martyn how the club stands compared to others in terms of what we can offer the manager? I think it's tragic that Derek has been abused on the websites and people suggesting he should be sacked, etc. We have an outstanding manager, a manager who can deliver. Does he have the assets to deliver with, and what are they relative to other clubs, please?
Hi, Bob. Thank you for the question. And can I just endorse the fact that we do have a first-class manager? I've worked with a number over my 14 years in professional football, and he is absolutely top drawer, and he's doing a great job. Obviously, we've had some setbacks this season, not least of which is in the goalkeeper department. We'll be using our 7th goalkeeper today of the season, which I think is pretty much unprecedented. I think I used that word when we'd used 5, so we're now on 7. It's just unbelievable. And we've had some mishaps with own goals and that sort of thing earlier in the season, so luck hasn't been on our side. Addressing the issue with budgets and that sort of thing, Bob, which I think is what you're alluding to. We do have some information from benchmarking with other clubs, and we know that we're in a cluster of clubs around the mid division. So from a budget point of view, we believe we're competitive. As a club, we're always looking to overachieve our resources, and Derek is absolutely on board with that. Here, he did it at Ross County. He wants to do it here to overachieve. So we don't believe that the budget issue is one that's holding us back. And indeed, we are making more funds available to him because we recognise the setbacks that we've had. Clearly, we've had to make more money available anyway to cover the goalkeeping situation. And we're continuing to support Derek financially as much as we possibly can.
Can I just add, because there was a question that came in over the internet relating to this. The question was asking us to confirm that League One rules about financial fair play are that we can spend up to 60% of turnover on basically the playing staff. I'd just say that it's a little bit more complicated than 60% of turnover, because the definition of turnover is a little bit different from the one that's normally used. But you can see the rules very clearly outlined at financialfairplay.co.uk. Martyn mentioned that we benchmark against other clubs. I have to say that those benchmarks are not widely available. They're not very accurate. And we would love to know what other clubs are spending on their playing staff. Therefore, we're absolutely not going to go public with what we're spending. They'd like to know what we're spending as well. So I'm afraid that information for competitive purposes has to remain confidential.
Thank you, Simon.
With the new facilities, I take it obviously you're going to earn extra money on wining and dining during the week for the fans, but will they include like a sports bar for i.e. like pool tables or darts or something like that for supporters to use in the week? Because when we had the old Far Post Club going, obviously we had a couple of pool teams and darts and whatever. Perhaps Tony could answer that one.
Well, Tony doesn't know, and I'm afraid I don't either. We're going to have two bars which are quite significant. I mean, they're more than bars. They're two halls, one on top of the other. As John mentioned, those will be managed by the GTs, and I think they are probably going to be quite creative in terms of the offers on non-match days as well as match days. So. What it looks like, I don't know, Ken, but I'm sure there's going to it'll be very well run, and I'm sure it will be open more than just match days. Thank you.
Hi. Following on from the question about the team budget, and it also sort of ties in some of the unexpected revenue that we got last year, and the recent BBC thing that showed that our costs for entry were not amongst the highest in the division, and we get approximately at least competitive crowds compared to most of the other teams. When all of that put together should put us surely nearer the top of the budgetary sort of spending, as opposed to the cluster at mid-table, as was referenced. And how can you reference a cluster at mid-table if you don't know what the other teams are spending because you said that you don't?
Okay, first of all, the clubs in this division, many of them are heavily subsidised by their owners, and that's their choice to put money into the club to fund their budget. Coming back to the mid-table issue on the budget, Simon's right. We don't know the exact figures during the course of the season, but we've got a pretty good steer of what the budgets are. And we are putting as much into the playing budget as we possibly can in order to maintain the financial viability of the football club.
Just adding to that, Roger, and hopefully squaring the circle for you, we get data from the English Football League for last season, what the clubs were paying, and it's not identified on a club-by-club basis, but you see a graph that shows what each of the clubs were playing, but not identified. Now, and the judgment for this season is: have clubs reduced, increased, and with the clubs coming out, going out into League Two, and the clubs going into the Championship, what do you think this season is going to look like? So, in terms of the budget setting, we're effectively looking at 1 year out of date. There were some clubs that went out of this division that had very high budgets. Sheffield United, for example. Those clubs that have come into this division that have got high budgets, like Wigan and Blackburn. So we've got a fairly good view, and then clearly each time directors come to the club, we try and get intelligence from them in terms of what have you done with your budget this season, and they'll tell us. They may be fibbing to us. We don't know, but that gives us a feel that, I mean, it feels like the budgets this season are pretty much how they were last season, and if that is the case, then we are in that middle pack. We're in that middle pack. I hope that's okay. I mean, sorry, just one other point that you picked up, and I know that Rick wouldn't forgive me if I didn't raise the point. That BBC survey, and we understand what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. We don't think it fairly reflects the cost of tickets to supporters, because what they're doing is they're comparing the cheapest ticket that each club provides to an adult non-concessionary customer. And we know that clubs that have standing, for example, if you look at extra seating relative to our seating, they're more expensive. If you look at the cheapest ticket, which is a standing ticket in the big bank, relative to us, they're cheaper. And so the BBC survey, they come up as if they've got cheaper tickets, which is, we don't think is fairly reflective of the actuality. Yeah, they're in a lower division and they're charging more for seating than we're charging in a higher division. So we don't think that Exeter City, for example, is better value than Plymouth Argyle. And there are probably other reasons we don't think it's better value either, but I won't go into that. Okay. No, sorry. The point that I thought you were making, and if I've misunderstood you, my apologies, was that you were, I thought, making the point that we actually charge more to our supporters than other clubs. And what I'm trying to say is that we don't believe that to be the case. But it was one of the ones that you raised, Roger, so I've responded to it. Okay, thank you. Totally agree. Well, I think Martyn's answered that, which is that some clubs run a deficit, they lose money, and that is not the model that we have to lose money. So that's clearly in terms of Blackburn, in terms of Portsmouth, they've got higher crowds than we've got, and we'll be generating. But you're so broadly right that in terms of our pre-fortune income, we would be higher than our budget. And the delta for that, as Martyn has explained, is the fact that some people lose money on football and we're trying not to. The salary cap, if everyone ran at 60% of turnover, they would be losing money. It doesn't prevent losses in this league.
That's why I said turnover, as defined by the financial fair play rules, is not as defined by normal accounting standards.
Just picking off my internet questions, there's one around we recently announced there's going to be a new messaging board to go outside the Devonport end. John, could I perhaps look to you to describe why that's been funded by the generosity of our fans, including Mrs. Hallett, rather than by the club?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, it's frustrating to have some of these questions, some of these loaded questions sometimes. And the reality is, this is a great thing. It's going to be a digital notice board on the outside of the stand, which will hopefully ensure that anyone who wants to know what's happening at the club will see that. Senior Greens have kind of got together a group of supporter groups and donations from those supporter groups, and we're very grateful for that. And Jane, Simon's wife, has matched their generosity, and as a result, we'll have a new digital sign up within, and I'm going to say 10 weeks. John, am I right on that? 10-week lead-in, and that's been ordered. Am I right, John? Okay, so we're going to end up with a great new facility. Yes, could the club have bought it? Yes, well, we could have, and as a result, something else someone would have missed out. Something else wouldn't have been done, or there would be less money available for the January budget that we've talked about already. So it's a great thing. It's great to have so much involvement with supporters, and it's great that Jane was up for matching that generous support.
Thank you, Jen. I'm mindful that we've only got about 10 minutes left, so any other questions from the floor before I continue through my list? Gents, we've had a couple of questions asking about the redevelopment. Clearly plans have been seen, but there's been a few people that have been asking for a description of what we'll have. What will the new ticket office look like? Where will the club be? The club shop be? And what will the new dining facility offer us?
Wow, thank you. And we've got 10 minutes to go through all that. Thanks, John. The new ticket office and the retail shop will be up the top end behind the Art Deco facade. So we're keeping that and building the shop and the ticket office behind that, which feels to us to be the right place for it to be. The dining experience, again, if you look at the total dining capacity of the Within the grandstand, it is around 800 covers, so 800 people sitting down to eat, which is obviously a massive increase on what we've currently got. That's split between a big dining hall, which is about 540 covers, 540 seats, and then a series of other boxes and dining rooms and so on within that space. And then on top of that, there is this two-story building, which I think is going to be absolutely fabulous. I mean, the top floor is going to have views to die for over Central Park towards the Sound, and that is going to be run by the GTs and provide the Fans Fest on one level and a variant of the Far Post Club on another level. It'll be bigger than the Far Post Club, and the sort of membership arrangements and everything to be determined. But that's where we're going. So there'll be plenty of sort of sit down eating and drinking. I mean, frankly, more than we need at this level. But hopefully, when we get back into the Championship, that will service that. And then we've got out here we've got a pedestrian piazza, where we're hoping to have food vans and so on for others. So we're going to be very well served for food and drink.
Thank you, James. And also just a couple of queries about possible timescales.
About possible
timescales. If and when planning permission goes through next week, as we hope
Absolutely.
it will, where will we be?
I'm dreadfully superstitious, so I'm not sort of I'm saluting every magpie that I see and blowing kisses at it as well. But if planning goes through, we've been what normally happens in major developments is you do all of the planning related work, and then you hopefully get your outcome, and then you spend some time celebrating it, and then you start work with the contractors. We've been running those two in parallel. We are in a very delicate state of negotiation with the preferred contractor, and if that is successful, we'd hope to start on site as planned in Q1 of next year, in the first quarter of 2018. So things will start happening quite imminently, as long as nothing falls over with the contractor and we get planning on Thursday. And the two bits that we're starting on early on are the grandstand, and that's going to be phased, because what we're trying to do is to make sure that we minimise the impact on our supporters. And so we're trying to do the sort of biggest and dirtiest bits during the close season. And one of the reasons that the ticket office and retail will be done really quite quickly is to free up this area, and the bars being built so that we can move the corporate hospitality in there on a short-term basis, and then free up the middle part to be sorted out. And the guys are working very hard to. No promises at this stage, but under the previous plans, we're obviously looking at moving the grandstand supports across to the Lyndhurst. What we're trying to do is to see whether we can phase the build program to minimise that disruption. So in terms, so that's the beginning part. The beginning part hopefully is very near term, subject to planning. At the back end, we are allowing a 15-month build period, but we're hoping to better that. So the intention is that come the close season 2019, we'll be up and running and raring to go, and hopefully celebrating a new grandstand and quite a change to Argyle.
That's great, thanks, James. And just to reiterate what you said earlier, Thursday's the date to the planning application. I think it's a 2:00 kick-off, and we're second on the agenda.
I didn't realise we were second on the agenda, but thank you for that. Thank you.
That's okay. And just as a prompt for the evening, and it's a 7:00 kick-off against Manchester City up at Home Park. So it's a full day for us. Any other questions? Take one there.
Hello, Anne Stiles. With regards to providing the new ticket office, is there any thoughts or plans going into actually revising the current management of the efficiency of ticket provision, and also monitoring and learning from some of the issues that we've experienced in recent years?
Well, we're certainly. I certainly hope we're doing the latter part of that anyway, because that isn't. That shouldn't be contingent on moving the location of the ticket office. There has been a lot of of soul searching and navel gazing and the rest of it about what happened over the Liverpool tickets, and how we would improve that if we had the benefit of a similar event in the short term. So that bit of reflection is going on. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are very keen to, and as Simon mentioned in our values statement, our value statement is not that we're good or okay or even very good. It is that we're excellent. And one of our specific values is fans focus. And so to live our values, which is really difficult to do. There are very few organisations that I've come across that are really driven by values. I think it's really brave for a football club to try to do that. You know, we started at the Royal Devon Exeter that I chair 5 years ago, and we're as a hospital trust, we're sort of getting there. But it's challenging. It's a really difficult thing to do. But we are, you know, very keen to use the move and use the introduction of new people into the club, like Zach and like Jamie, to, you know, really drive a positive change. And you know, from my experience, you change the working environment, and that gives you a really good opportunity to change people's approach. I think we have some fabulous staff here, I'd hasten to add. But yeah, we all recognise that we're a long way from being excellent, and if that's our value, then we have got some wood to chop, as the Americans would say. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I'm mindful of my promise to finish sharp on 11:30 to allow the GTs to set up. I'm going to take one last question, and then I'll hand back to the board.
Good morning, Alan Murray. Just might be just to state the obvious, but actually the planning meeting on Thursday can be viewed on a webcast on the Plymouth City website for people that can't attend it. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Alan. Sorry, in terms of the link, is that already up on our website, Rick, or could we put it up if it's not? That's really kind. So we'll put it. Thank you for reminding us about that, Alan. Simon's just mentioned to me, John, if you could forgive us, there was one question that came in on the internet that you haven't raised, that keen to answer it. So I'll pass across to Simon to answer that.
The question, sorry, which one? The question about there were a couple of questions actually. One was asking about the club's debt, which I can answer now, just very briefly. The club's debt at the moment, long-term debt, is a little under £300,000. 210,000 or so is to Plymouth City Council. There's a debt of about 75,000 that funds the Football League pension deficit, and there's about 13,000 to a footballer who didn't participate in the settlements we made several years ago. There's also convertible securities outstanding to one of the directors, Richard Holliday. It's been outstanding for a number of years. And there's the loan facility that my wife and I have made available to the club, which is about 4.1 million. There are no other loans from directors at all. Just to remind you, the loans that the directors had, Tony, James, and I, were all converted into shares last year. So the club pays no interest, the club doesn't have to pay them back. So the club's balance sheet is now actually in very sound condition. And the interest burden, which we've had to bear from our revenues over the last few years, has now been reduced to a very minimal level. The other question was, well, I'll read it. The question goes, the internet is awash in rumours that the club is already paying down Simon and Jane Hallett's loan and therefore wasting money as the work at Home Park is not ready to go ahead. Can you confirm if that is the case, and if so, how much has been paid? Clearly one of those loaded questions that John referred to. And actually, on the contrary, I can confirm that that is not the case. The loan facility has not been drawn down, not a single penny, let alone repaid, not a single penny. So I just remind you what Abraham Lincoln said, which is, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Thank you, Simon.
Could I just sort of add to that? I'm not saying it just because the bloke's sort of sitting next to me, but the loan that's being made available to the club is at 2.72% per annum over a 30-year period. It is for tax purposes, it is clearly an arm's length loan and it's an appropriate interest rate, but from our standpoint, it is incredible generosity that Simon and Jane Hallett have provided that loan. I did say when he agreed to provide the loan to the club, if he's got any more of that money swirling around, I'd quite happily borrow it for other purposes. But he sort of advised me that he wasn't available for that. So it really is a very, very generous offer from Simon and Jane, and I think we should recognise that. Anyway, just to, I think our time's come to an end. If I just reiterate the board's gratitude to everyone for coming out, it's really difficult with these events in terms of timing it relative to the match. And I know some folk come from Cornwall to be here today, so really appreciate that. I appreciate there's a gap. I'm certainly going to hang around for the next 10 minutes or so. I'd encourage the board members to do so, and if anyone wants to raise any concerns they have that they didn't want to raise in public, please come up and have a chat with any of us. But thank you for coming, and fingers crossed for 3 points this afternoon. Thank you. Thanks.